Hello and welcome back. In this last video of this module, we're going to be discussing two more features of the innate immune response, phagocytosis and programmed cell death. Now, both of these are processes that happen in other contexts outside of the immune system. So we're going to focus on ways that these two, fundamental cellular processes shape immune responses to infection. We're going to start with phagocytosis, which we've mentioned many times now is important for several features of host control of infection, and then segue into ways that it's actually interrelated with the process of programmed cell death. So we've introduced ourselves to several different types of phagocytes throughout the course. Macrophages, of course, are very famous phagocytes, but we've also discussed monocytes, dendritic cells, and neutrophils. All of these cells have the ability to bind microbes and internalize them through the process of cellular eating, or phagocytosis. And what this figure is showing you is that macrophages and other phagocytes are coated with a number of receptors which allow them to recognize pathogens in a very effective way. These receptors recognize two major classes of molecules. One are molecules that we call pathogen-associated molecular patterns, or PAMPs. And remember, these were those shapes, those molecular shapes associated with pathogens that identify them as non-self entities to our cells. So they include things like mannose, which we've seen in the complement system, that is carbohydrate residues that are associated with yeast and bacteria, but not with our own mammalian cells. The other class of molecules are opsonins, and these, remember, are molecules that are specifically tailor-made for targeting cells for phagocytosis. So two major classes of opsonins that we've been introduced to are complement. So macrophages have complement receptors like CR1, which recognizes C3b, an opsonin on the surface of cells, as well as FC receptors. We'll talk about what FC is later in the course, but for the purposes of this lecture, FC receptors recognize antibodies. So remember that antibodies can serve as opsonins in their own rights. And so when antibodies opsonize targets, they are recognized by FC receptors on the surface of phagocytes, which allow for their internalization. So this is how macrophages and other phagocytes recognize targets that we want them to eat, and so all of these things can be considered eat me signals. But once they've been eaten, what happens to them? Why is phagocytosis so good at controlling infection? Well, we can look at it this way. So when bacteria or yeast bind to their various phagocytic receptors, they are internalized within a membrane-bound compartment called the phagosome. So this looks just like an endosome, but it's through phagocytosis, so we call it a phagosome. That phagosome is internalized into the cell, and it actually fuses with a different organelle called the lysosome. So you may remember from previous coursework that lysosomes are organelles which are responsible for digestion, breaking down cellular contents within the the intracellular portion of the cell. And lysosomes do this through a combination of low pH, acidic pH, and digestive enzymes, which make up which fill the interior of the lysosome, basically. So when the lysosome and the phagosome fuse, they form a new organelle that we call the phagolysosome. And all of those contents of the lysosome now have access to anything that was in the phagosome, and they degrade it appropriately. And so those bacteria or those yeast are efficiently neutralized and broken down, and are no longer of any threat. We can look at this in slightly more detail in this figure. So we can see in this example a bacterium, because it attached to the surface of a phagocyte at these elongations of the membrane that we call pseudopodia. These pseudopodia invaginate and sort of pinch off, and that pinching off process is what leads to the formation of the phagosome, this membrane-bound vesicle. The phagosome is internalized and it fuses with a lysosome, which contains all of those lysosomal components like enzymes. And this fused organelle now is the phagolysosome. The bacterium is broken down and digested by the low pH and the enzymes. And ultimately, the remnants, the leftovers, the cellular garbage, if you will, are excreted from the cell through the process of exocytosis and release. So they can either be recycled by other cells or just secreted from the body, basically. So these are the major organellar structures that accomplish the process of phagocytosis. But let's look a little bit more closely at what is contained within the phagolysosome that is, really behind the process of digesting bacteria and other pathogens. So you don't need to memorize all of these different, molecules and mechanisms here, but your book is helpful in identifying major classes of action, classes of molecular mechanisms by which the phagolysosome breaks down pathogens. They include certainly acidification, so lysosomes have low pH in the range of about 4, and that's either bacteriostatic, meaning it prevents bacterial growth, or for many bacteria, that's bactericidal, it actually kills them. So that's an important feature. Phagolysosomes also contain reactive oxygen and nitrogen species. So these reactive, molecular species react with the membranes and the organelles of the bacteria or other pathogens and neutralize them that way. Both macrophages and neutrophils have their own classes of antimicrobial peptides which reside within the phagolysosome. You don't need to memorize which belongs with which, but you can recognize some of the names like defensins, which we were introduced to earlier. There are also enzymes in the phagolysosome, like lysozyme, which we've seen before. And what you can see is that there's all sorts of things happening in the phagolysosome. We have multiple additive mechanisms that break down any kind of pathogen that we internalize through the process of phagocytosis within our immune cells. And so, the phagolysosome of a leukocyte is not a place you want to be if you're a bacterium. And for all of these reasons. One thing that you can notice here too is that macrophages and neutrophils, they're both very good phagocytes, but neutrophils in particular have some unique mechanisms by which they break down things that they eat. And that's because, if you recall, neutrophils are granulocytes. So in their cytoplasm, they have all of these distinct granular structures which contain all sorts of different antimicrobial proteins and other factors. And as it turns out, when neutrophils internalize microbes, they recognize PAMPs just like macrophages do. This is an example of a PAMP here that they use to internalize things. You don't need to worry about the signaling that's being represented in this figure. What I want you to focus on is that within the internal, the cytoplasm of the neutrophil, we have a phagosome that's been internalized. We have a lysosome, but we also have these granules, which can also fuse with the phagosome. So the phagolysosomes of neutrophils are somewhat specialized because they contain a broader variety of antimicrobial proteins which are contained within these granular structures. So the granules contain enzymes like lysozyme and like others, or they might contain enzymatic complexes like NADPH oxidase, which creates reactive oxygen species. But neutrophils just have a lot at their disposal, so they're very, very good at killing things that they eat because they have the additional help of their cytoplasmic granules. Killing pathogens is one of the things that is very important about phagocytosis by leukocytes. But remember that phagocytosis serves another important function in the immune system, which is to link innate and adaptive immunity. So pathogens that are internalized, particularly by professional antigen-presenting cells like dendritic cells and macrophages, they are internalized into the phagolysosome, and this process of breaking them down also functions to process antigens that can then be loaded onto MHC class II molecules and presented on the surface of the cell. So if you recall our discussion of antigen presentation, we need pretty small peptide fragments to use as antigens to present via MHC class II, very short amino acid sequences. And so the phagolysosome, of course, is full of degradatory enzymes which are going to break down the proteins associated with pathogens into small fragments. So we can take advantage of that and kind of shuttle some of those peptides, instead of releasing them through exocytosis, put them through a different endocytic pathway, which results in their being loaded onto MHC class II and presented to CD4 T cells, which of course express the co-receptor necessary to sense pathogens being presented by MHC class II. So antigen presentation is another important feature of how phagocytosis influences and primes an adaptive immune response. So one additional thing that phagocytosis does that we want to point out is actually take care of the debris of dead cells. And so during an infection, you do have a lot of cell death typically. Either the infection itself kills the cell, or perhaps the immune system is killing the cells. But in any case, we need to get rid of those cellular corpses, as it were. We don't want them to build up because they have a lot of deleterious effects if we have too many of them. So one of the major ways that cells die, which I'm sure you've seen in previous courses, is this process of apoptosis or apoptosis, if you will. Either is correct, but I'm going to say apoptosis. And in the process of apoptosis, the cell chooses to die in a programmed fashion. So sometimes we call this cellular suicide, cell programmed suicide. But in apoptosis, there's a very a stereotyped morphological way that cells die, and it's very recognizable under the microscope. When cells begin to undergo apoptosis, they begin to shrink, and the DNA, the chromatin in their nucleus also begins to shrink and fragment. The plasma membrane of the cell starts to bleb or kind of like bubble out into smaller little balloon structures, and eventually the cell starts doing some pretty crazy morphological things. And it breaks down in ways that result in the formation of these entities called apoptotic bodies. What's really important about the apoptotic bodies is that they are self-contained structures. So they have a plasma membrane, and they prevent any of the stuff in the cytoplasm from the cell from being released into the extracellular environment. So all those organelles, everything that was being degraded inside the cell, remains packaged within a membrane-bound vesicular structure called an apoptotic body in a way that's pretty clean. And these apoptotic bodies are really, really yummy to macrophages. Macrophages, when they see apoptotic bodies, they immediately start to eat them and process them through phagocytosis. So they digest them, they recycle anything that's good, they get rid of anything that's not. And for this reason, macrophages have a very important function of being sort of our cleanup crew. They take care of any apoptotic cells that they encounter in our bodies. So this happens downstream of multiple ways that cells might undergo apoptosis, either intrinsically or extrinsically. So cells can die on their own terms. They can decide to undergo apoptosis because they have an infection or they have genotoxic stress or something, but they can also be induced to undergo apoptosis extrinsically. And in the context of an immune system, this particularly happens downstream of cytotoxic T cells, CD8 T cells. So the way that cytotoxic T cells actually kill their targets is to induce them to undergo apoptosis. So either way, either infection or the external immune response can induce this process. So we need phagocytes like macrophages to clean up the sort of aftermath of those processes. But I keep sort of coming back to the fact that these apoptotic bodies are self-contained. And the reason for that is that the cytoplasm of cells, of all cells, include molecules that we call danger-associated molecular patterns. Often these are molecules which are normal molecules, they do all sorts of things inside the cell, but they're meant to be on the inside of the cell. And so if a cell dies and if it releases its contents into the extracellular space, now we have things that were supposed to be inside on the outside. And that's a very clear signal to other healthy cells in the environment that something is wrong, something is happening, and we need to make some kind of response to address this danger, which is why we call them danger-associated molecular patterns. What's important about apoptosis is that the DAMPs, the danger-associated molecular patterns, are sequestered. They remain trapped within the membrane-bound vesicles of the apoptotic body. So actually, in the process of apoptosis, DAMPs are not released. So for that reason, we do not think of apoptosis as a particularly inflammatory form of cell death. In fact, apoptosis is sort of generally regarded as immunologically silent. That's good because billions of cells in our bodies are dying every day by apoptosis. We don't want apoptosis to trigger an immune response. We would have a lot of inflammation and autoimmunity if that were the case. And so this process is very carefully regulated to make sure that inflammation is not a result of apoptotic programmed cell death. So we can see the process of apoptosis in action under the microscope in this video. If you pay attention to these cells, they've been treated with a chemical stimulus that's going to induce them to undergo apoptosis. So we're going to see them start to condense a little bit, but eventually they're going to start to bleb and throw off those membrane-bound vesicles that I was mentioning before. I think this cell gets started first. Wait for it. There we go. So you can see that it almost has the appearance of boiling, but you can see all of these little round membrane-bound vesicular structures. Now this one is doing it. And eventually, the cell is going to break down into a whole bunch of really small vesicular apoptotic bodies. But what you can see is that the media is still pretty clear around these cells. Not a lot of stuff is being released or extruded from these cells. These cells are still pretty much self-contained. And if there were macrophages in this culture preparation, they could come in then and eat those apoptotic bodies and digest them. So very, very easy to image this under the microscope, which is nice for our purposes. So this is apoptosis, but apoptosis is not, in fact, the only way that a cell dies. You may also remember from previous coursework that cells can undergo a different form of cell death called necrosis, and we typically think of necrosis as unprogrammed cell death. So this happens if a cell is poked mechanically or burned or frozen. A lot of different mechanical forces can cause a cell basically to lose membrane integrity. So necrosis happens when a cell's plasma membrane is perturbed somehow. And a necrotic cell, instead of being broken down into apoptotic bodies, is instead really just going to sort of disintegrate, or it might even sort of swell and pop, because when you perturb the plasma membrane, as we saw, for example, with the membrane attack complex, that disturbs the osmotic balance of the cell, allows water to rush in, and when it does so, the plasma membrane swells and ultimately kind of just explodes like a balloon. And when that happens, all of those danger-associated molecular patterns in the cytoplasm are now free to be released into the extracellular space. And when they do so, they can activate damage-associated molecular pattern receptors, DAMP receptors, on the surface of immune cells in the environment. And the activation of these receptors leads to the activation of pro-inflammatory responses by these cells. So a lot of different things can happen, but this is going to induce an immune response. It's going to be pro-inflammatory. And this is in contrast to apoptotic cell death, which, remember, is basically cleared by macrophages without inducing any additional inflammatory activation. An important point, which I'll highlight because this is actually a process that my lab studies, is that necrosis is not always accidental. And in fact, we've come to understand over the past 10 or 15 years that cells can actually choose to undergo programmed suicide in multiple ways, not only apoptosis. So this is a little bit of a misnomer. Apoptosis is only one form of programmed cell death. And in fact, cells can choose to undergo necrosis in a programmed way. And when cells undergo programmed necrosis, we call that process necroptosis. So we combine necrosis and apoptosis. And a cell might want to undergo necroptosis because of a lot of different, biochemical or other inflammatory microenvironment cues. But basically, if a cell chooses to undergo necroptosis, it's going to basically permeabilize its cell membrane, swell and pop, release all those damps, and it's going to induce a really strong inflammatory response. And so necroptosis and necrosis are ways that a cell can activate the immune system downstream of cell death, as opposed to apoptosis, which is going to be immunologically silent, as I said. And so what I really want to stress here is that the way a cell dies determines the type of immune response or the type of immune activation that we have. And that's going to be important for overall the way that we control whatever it was that killed the cell in the first place, if it was an infection or what have you. So we can also see necroptosis happening under the microscope quite nicely. So in this cell preparation, these cells have been infected with a virus. The virus turns the cell green, so any of the green fluorescing cells are infected. And there's a dye in the medium of the cell culture, which, when it binds to the DNA of the cell, will turn red. So right now, the red cells are dead cells. So when a cell turns red, that's because it's died. It's because it's lost membrane integrity. So the virus in this preparation causes necroptosis. So we're viewing necroptosis happening. And what you'll see is that the infected cells in green kind of swell and pop. And as soon as they pop, they turn red because that dye is binding with the DNA in their nucleus. So you see this looks way different than apoptosis, right? All of these little infected cells, they're swelling like balloons, they're popping. And when they do so, instead of sequestering their damps, they're releasing those damps into the medium here. But if this were in an animal, of course, they'd be releasing it into the extracellular environment where they could be sensed by any of the cells that were nearby, including any immune cells, which might, in fact, be quite activated by sensing those damps. So what the point that I'm making here is that necroptotic cells pop as opposed to blebbing, and when they do so, they release DAMPs, which is quite immunogenic. So why is DAMP signaling immunogenic? Well, a couple of major points that I want to show here are that, first, what are DAMPs? I keep, referencing them, and I said there are things that belong on the inside of the cell. Well, some of these things are quite recognizable, things like ATP or mitochondrial DNA. These things have clear purposes under normal cellular conditions on the inside of the cell, but we don't normally see ATP or mitochondrial DNA outside, and when we do, that's a clear signal that something is wrong. And so ATP and mitochondrial DNA and some of these other factors can be recognized by DAMP receptors, or sometimes we call these danger receptors, on healthy cells that are external to the dead cell. And this is going to activate a number of different immunomodulatory processes that shape both innate and adaptive immunity. So we can see one of these things is the activation of pro-inflammatory cytokine signaling, but there are other ways that this process influences immune responses, perhaps by inhibiting apoptosis in other cells, or by regulating an adaptive response called tolerance, which we'll talk about later in the semester. The point of this slide, again, is not to memorize all of these DAMPs and their receptors. What I want you to appreciate here is that the release of DAMPs is going to influence the immune system in a way that's very different than a cell that dies via apoptosis. So these danger-associated molecular patterns change an immune response in a way that is going to be really important for making sure that we control infection in a really targeted way. And in fact, we know now that the release of DAMPs is a really important feature for controlling particularly viral infections. So this process is really important, and is a way that cell death ultimately contributes to the innate immune response. Okay, let's summarize. So we started by talking about phagocytosis, which I want to stress is a really, really important immune effector function, both because phagocytes can bind pathogens through those phagocytic receptors on their surface, which we mentioned, but also because phagocytosis, in addition to killing targets, links innate and adaptive immunity through the process of antigen presentation. So we need phagocytosis by innate immune cells to ever prime an adaptive immune response, particularly a CD4 T cell response via MHC class II. Phagocytic cells break down their targets when they kill them in organellar structures called phagolysosomes. So the lysosomal compartment is harsh, it's full of antimicrobial agents. It's not a place, as I said, where you want to be if you're a bacterium, so it's a great antimicrobial strategy that phagocytic cells use. And neutrophils in particular are very good at this effector function because they use antimicrobial agents within their cytoplasmic granules to fuse with the phagolysosomes and augment their sort of natural antimicrobial activity. The second half of the lecture, we talked about programmed cell death and how it contributes to the control of infection. So programmed cell death is important just because it removes a cell as what we call a replicative niche from the environment. So, bacteria or intracellular bacteria and viruses, they use cells, they use the resources of the cell to replicate themselves and to spread. And so if a cell undergoes programmed cell death, it basically removes itself as an environment for that pathogen to use. And so sometimes just choosing to die is the best way to control infection, just right at the source. But in addition to promoting control of infection that way, programmed cell death has immunological consequences, so it can exert regulatory activity over immune cells. And this is primarily controlled by the type of programmed cell death that the cell undergoes. So cells are full of things called damage-associated molecular patterns, which are potently inflammatory signaling molecules. And sequestration of these DAMPs in the process of apoptosis can prevent those DAMPs from activating the immune system, whereas the release of DAMPs during cell death processes like necroptosis instead activates the immune system. So the modality of cell death is going to define its immunologic activity during infection. Okay, so that's the end of Module 2, our introduction to the innate immune response. So next week, we're going to finish our discussion of innate immunity. Of course, it's going to come up over and over again, but these 2 weeks are really a focus on innate immunity. And in the next module, we're going to talk a little bit more about the molecular mechanisms by which cells actually sense pathogens. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the process of pattern recognition, as well as the chemical messengers which transduce immunological signals, and these are messenger molecules called cytokines and chemokines. See you next week.